Amigas y amigos, bienvenidos a una nueva video entrevista en iRock. Estamos junto a uno de los músicos más importantes de la actual escena musical, reconocido por su trabajo con Porcupine Tree y luego por su exitosa y vanguardista carrera solista. Estamos hablando del gran Steven Wilson, quien por estos días está lanzando un nuevo disco llamado The Harmony Codex. Steven, it's really a pleasure. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good indeed.
That's great. Tell me, well, Economies of Scale was your first single, and the Harmony Codex, your new album. How do you feel about releasing new solo material after some years?
Well, it's exciting to me because obviously the last one, The Future Bites, was about 3 years ago, and the whole thing happened. Unfortunately for me, the whole thing coincided with COVID and lockdown. So it felt like a bit of a non-event, really. And this time it couldn't be more different. It feels very exciting. The fans are really excited. Everyone's engaged. It feels like people are really wanting this record. And we've been doing a lot of playback events in Dolby Atmos and getting fans along to listen to the record in the darkness, but just with this incredible sound all around them and above them. So far, it's been probably the most fun I've ever had, releasing a new record. It's just been so exciting.
You always feel the same, or sometimes you said, this record is
Listen, I'm always passionate about any record I've just made. Of course, it stands to reason that I'm very passionate about it. But some albums are harder than others to Future Bites was very hard, A, because it came out in COVID, and second, because it was a very controversial album with my fan base. It was a very pop-orientated record, and not everyone liked that, obviously. So that was kind of hard. But this one, it feels like everyone seems to be connecting with it so far, which is great, because it's a very experimental record, but it's also very conceptual, it's very ambitious, and it has a real cinematic kind of quality to it, which I think people are really engaging with deeply. They're almost sort of experiencing it as a piece of cinema for the ears, and I like that because that's kind of the way I think about music myself.
Right. And talking about the previous one, The Future Bites, do you feel like this one is a continuation or just completely different universe?
That's a good question. It's completely different, but it's also a continuation. I mean, it is completely different. But this one thing I think people have mentioned about this record, and I do think this is true, and I'm talking about the new record, not The Future Bites, the Harmony Codex. People have said that in a way they can hear aspects of all of my previous records in this album. So there is a little bit of the electronica of The Future Bites. There's also some of the sort of more conceptual rock of albums like Hand Cannot Erase and the Raven That Refused to Sing. There's some of the more alternative, almost post-punk aspects of an album like Insurgentes. It's all in there. There's the more nostalgic acoustic songs. There's the more ambient aspects as well. And so there's a little bit of all of the things that people think of that I do. There's a little bit of everything in this record. But at the same time, it also feels like something different and new as well. So it's one of those albums that just seems to resonate really well with all of the fans. Whereas I think some of my previous albums, some of the fans would like it, but other fans, they wouldn't like it so much. This one seems like it seems to be hitting everyone at least everyone's curious about it anyway.
Okay. And well, the first single, Economies of Scale, sounds very synth pop. Do you have any particular interest in these sounds, or maybe going far from rock? I don't know.
Oh yeah. For a long time I've had very little interest in rock music, really. I think most of the last 10-15 years I've been more interested in electronic sound, but that's the world we live in. We live in an electronic universe. I mean, our lives in our lives we're surrounded by electronics and electronic sound and in technology. This is the sound of the modern world, even the sounds that come from our phones, Rock music to me was the music of the second half of the 20th century. And it's extraordinary, and it produced some of the great masterpieces of music. But I think in much the same way that rock music when it came along in the 1950s, kind of rendered jazz music underground music, which jazz had been the dominant music in the first half of the 20th century. Rock music became the dominant music of the second half of the 20th century. To me, there's no question that electronic and urban music has made rock music the underground music, and it's become the dominant form of music in the 21st century. And while, as someone that comes from the tradition of rock music like me might be sad about that, I think it's also exciting that music continues to change and continues to evolve and continues to twist into different shapes. And I think that's important. So I still love rock music, but I have to say I don't listen to a lot of it anymore. And my interest is more in what I can do with modern technology and all the possibilities that presents to me as a musician. Yeah.
That's great. And well, talking about the video, it was just director's idea. Do you have influence on what he did in Economies of Scale?
So when you employ a director, one of the things you're asking them to do is to come up with ideas. You know, that's you want a director to have ideas. So Charlie had this idea. I knew I wanted a dance-based video. And I knew I wanted a video, preferably a dance-based video, that would be shot in one integral sequence. No cuts, no edits. But that was as much as I had. I didn't have anything beyond that. So Charlie, the director, and the dancers then took that concept and created the choreography, created the location, created the style. And I think it's incredible. I absolutely adore that video. And it was so thrilling to see the music interpreted in that way.
Yeah, that's great. The one camera sequence gives it like a shocking.
It's breathtaking, isn't it? Yeah, breathtaking. Yeah.
Well, is there any common theme or topic between all the songs of the album?
So there is. So you've got my book there. Now, in the book, there is, as you probably know, there is a short story also called The Harmony Codex. And so the book ends with a piece of fictional writing, and I wanted to end the book with a piece of fiction. And the story is basically about this brother and sister that go into a building, and there's a terrorist attack on the building, and they find themselves trapped in the building and unable to get out of the building. So they find themselves on a staircase going up, and that staircase becomes an infinite staircase. It's never ending. So it becomes, at that point, the story becomes very dreamlike, very surreal, even to the point that the characters themselves are not sure what's real and what's a dream. But I love this idea, this kind of central metaphor of the never-ending staircase. And a lot of the songs are based on this idea of never-ending staircase. So to me, that becomes a metaphor for our lives, because if you think about it, at least I'm in my 50s now, so I definitely feel this is true. A lot of life is not about, it's about the journey. It's not about the arrival. It's about being on the staircase. And that can be a beautiful thing, and it can be a very stressful thing. You know, there's a lot of life, of course, that is very anxiety inducing, this pressure we're under to provide for our family, to compete with everyone else, to battle with illness and stress, and to accumulate money and all of this stuff. And then one day you find yourself massively in debt, surrounded by shit you don't really need. Your life's being run by technology. And all of this stuff, I think, is something we're all familiar with now, being part of the modern world. So this idea of the never-ending staircase to me becomes like a metaphor for this idea of being constantly unable to get off the staircase. But there is also something very beautiful about that, about being able to recognize that sometimes it's the moments that you don't expect, the moments that come while you're traveling, while you're on this journey, rather than arriving at your destination, that become the most significant in a way and important in your life. So that's a very quick way to try and sum up a very complicated, idea. But hopefully that makes some sense. Yeah.
There's other interesting things on the book. Like you love the lists, and when you start working in new material, how is your to-do list?
Well, it's funny because this is the first time really I haven't had a plan when I started a record. And no, but you're right, because usually I do. I am very nerdy and I usually have a very particular idea. And I go out of my way to execute that idea. And so, for example, with the Future Bites, I had the concept. I knew I wanted to make a very streamlined, electronic, almost pop record. Going back a few years, an album like The Raven That Refused to Sing, I knew that I wanted to make almost like a classical progressive rock, 70s style progressive rock album. So I would always have these ideas and these concepts and this kind of agenda from the beginning of a project. And for once, I didn't have anything. I didn't know what kind of record I wanted to make. I didn't feel like I was particularly influenced by anything at that time, either musical or cinematic, or I just sat down and started, and this was again at the beginning of lockdown. I just sat down and started to create music. And I think it's one of the reasons the record to me sounds like it almost exists outside of any musical genre. It's very hard to define what kind of album this is, apart from saying it's got this kind of cinematic quality to it, because it is so diverse and it's so eclectic and it moves through so many different styles and approaches. And I think part of that is just because I didn't really think too hard about what I wanted to do. I didn't try and develop a plan or have a schedule. I just allowed the music to flow in a very organic way.
That's great. Well, when Porcupine Tree broke up, you felt some lack of interest, like you were repeating some stuff. What did you learn for not falling in the same feeling in these days?
It's very hard to reinvent yourself constantly. That's the hardest thing for me, is with each album, I'm so set on not simply doing more of what I've already done, that in many ways it becomes a search for something that will excite me and motivate me to see a project through. It's hard because we're in a world now where there is so much music. There's more music being made now, and more music being made and released online or physical than at any other time in history. It's incredible. I mean, I think it's like Spotify add 120,000 songs every single day. It's crazy, you know. And when I was growing up, when I was first discovering music, there was maybe 4 or 5 albums coming out every week. Now there's 400 or 500 albums coming out every week.
Yes.
So it's very easy to feel like you're drowning as both an artist and a listener, I think. Not only music, movies, TV shows, books. We're living in a world now where we're bombarded with content all the time. So making music now for me is, I mean, it stands to reason that it becomes a real labor of love. You have to do it because you love doing it. You have to do it because you want to do it. And you have to do it, at least I have to do it, because I feel like I have something I want to say, or at least something I want to share with the people that listen to my music. And that isn't doing more of what I've already done, because what would be the point of that? That's always been my philosophy. And I understood a long time ago, and I wrote about this in the book, which you might have read. One of the things I understood is that very often the fans feel the opposite. What they really want is for you to do more of the kind of music that they fell in love with when they first discovered your music. So they walked through a door into your room, into your house, and they discovered this space that they fell in love with. And they want more of that all the time. And if you understand that, then you understand the mentality of the relation, or at least you understand the relationship between the person that creates and the person that experiences the art. And I think there are ways to strike a very good balance. So Impossible Tightrope is a song, the title is about that, walking that tightrope between keeping your own artistry fresh, keep, challenging yourself, but also still being able to somehow involve and engage your listeners enough in what you do. It's a very hard thing to do, and it becomes harder and harder with the modern world and the amount of music that is being constantly given to the world, you know, and trying to get people's attention for more than 15 seconds on TikTok is really hard. And this is an album, of course, which demands an hour, more than an hour, of someone's attention. So I work really hard to, I mean, you can see I'm doing it now. I work really hard to talk about the music, to try to get people interested and to try to get people looking in my direction. But it is harder and harder with every year.
Yes, of course. Well, will you come back to play live in Chile with this album?
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. I love coming to Chile. What an amazing place. What an amazing fan base they are. Right now, I'm just starting to think about how I would present my next tour. I'm not in any rush. I think if it happens, it'll be next spring 2024. I would love to be able to do something where I create some kind of environment that feels more immersive. I want to get away from the two-dimensional thing of the band there and the audience here. I want to feel some way that I can take this aspect of cinema for the ears into a live context. So I'm thinking maybe of doing smaller venues, but doing like a whole week of shows, like a residency in the same venue, where I can bring in a spatial audio system and have like installations and lights and screens. But it's very early days yet. So as I say, I'm just beginning to think about that. But yes, if I was going to come, if I was going to go out and do that, I would love to bring it to Chile. Absolutely, yeah.
That will be great. And I can't finish with the obvious question. I'm sorry. Is there any more life for Porcupine Tree?
You know, I would never say never. I prefer to move forwards, not backwards. You know, we've already talked about that. But listen, Porcupine Tree for me feels like something where the last album we made, the last tour we made, it felt really nice. It felt like a really nice way to close things in a very positive way. But that doesn't necessarily mean the door is permanently closed. Maybe. I don't see any need to draw a line completely under it. Put it that way, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Steven, for the last, I would like to, if you can send us some greetings for our website, iRock website.
Hi, this is Stephen Wilson sending out a big hello to all the viewers of the iRock website in Chile. Enjoy the music. Thank you very much.
Well, Steven, it's been really a pleasure. Really a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you here.
Thank you, Felipe. It's been a pleasure for me too. Gracias. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.